President Trump wrote on Twitter, "Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life." Don't let it dominate your life?
In terms of responding to a comment like that, it's gross.
It's okay to be afraid of COVID, and it's okay that it's dominating your life.
Everyone should be afraid of COVID.
You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
I can't come in, Mom. It's because of this flu thing.
We won't be free of this pandemic until we listen to the acknowledged truth. Listen to the scientists.
Science is truth.
You know, science is truth.
What is the impact to public health when people are openly questioning the science?
Now is the time to do what you're told.
By not.
Hi, everyone. How are you? So, with all the talk about the New England serial killer, some debating whether there is a serial killer or not, assuming there is, I've been reading this book by Dr. Helen Morrison, a forensic psychiatrist who has interviewed over 100 serial killers. And she published this book quite a while ago. I think it's 2003. Looking up the dates. Yeah, first printing was 2005. So, but the information, and she still is around, and she's giving interviews. You can catch some interviews on YouTube where she gives some great information and understanding, what serial killers are like, what characteristics they have, and how, and some information on how they come about, because there are a lot of misconceptions because of Hollywood and confusion with other types of murderers. So she's interviewed, there we go, you can see the name there. She's interviewed John Wayne Gacy and other very prominent known serial killers. So I just thought I would give some of the some points in her book that she gives. It's very surprising. It's not what you would expect in just the idea, what to look for, who could be a serial killer, because there's a lot of people saying, they see somebody creepy with creepy eyes and they think that might be the guy, So I just thought to give some points here from her book. So in the introduction of her book, she talks about how serial killers do not relate to others on any level that you would expect a person to relate to another, but they can play their roles beautifully, create complex and earnest performances that no Hollywood Oscar winner could hold a candle to. They can mimic anything. They can appear to be complete, whole human beings. In some cases, they are pillars of society, but they're missing a very essential core of human relatedness. For them, killing is nothing at all. Serial murderers have no emotional connection to their victims. So that's important to point out, because people often may think that some of these killings were personal, like in a relationship. But she describes how these killers just go off for no apparent reason, and there's oftentimes, in most if not all cases, there's no relationship, there's no connection. They didn't meet through work or anything. So continuing on, she said that's probably the most chilling part about it. Not only do they not care, but they have no ability to care. So when she interviewed all of these serial killers, and she spent hours of, almost 100 hours with each one. And she said that when she'd start out a session with them, talking to them, interviewing them, they were so friendly and so kind and very solicitous at the very beginning of working together that she was often swept up in their world, however briefly. And she often thought, is this person the right person? Is this really the serial killer? Maybe I've missed something. She said they're charming, almost unbelievably so, and charismatic. So this notion of them being so charismatic, and like John Wayne Gacy used to have parties where politicians would visit his yearly parties that he would throw. These people are often pillars of society, like she said. They can be. So they're not necessarily the homeless guy with the beady looking eyes hanging out in that dark alley. They could be, in politics, high up, and you'd never suspect. Another thing she points out is that there's a popular perception that they have been physically or sexually abused by their parents when they were children. And she says that is the stuff of fiction. It's a complete misconception. So serial killers are not created by abusive families. They're not created by any kind of childhood abuse. And very often, they have multiple children in one family, and only one of the children becomes a serial killer while the other children have perfectly normal lives, law-abiding lives, not going around killing people. So there's a lot of we don't understand as to what makes a serial killer, but she believes, judging from her interviews and whatnot, that it's something in the brain and the limbic system, and that's some kind of emotional issue there that develops where they have no attachment to people. But it's not something that's necessarily formed from environmental influences. And when she was interviewing the serial killers, she would say, "How could she couldn't believe how a cold-blooded serial killer could be so convincingly polite." Another common misconception is that they must be drug addicts or alcoholics. But she says that no serial murderers that she interviewed were addicted to drugs or drink or even smoking. It's not uncommon for serial killers in general to believe that things have the characteristics of people, just as sometimes they believe people are things without feelings. So it's not from drugs. It's not from drinking drugs that someone can become a serial killer. But there is, as she pointed out, they'll see their car, for example, as alive, and as a living thing, and they'll see human beings as inanimate objects without feelings. So there is some kind of disconnect there in how they relate to others, even if they put on a convincing act of being all charming and polite. Another misconception about them, as she points out, is that most serial killers rarely abuse those very close to them because their family, the very idea of wife and kids, is part of a structure that keeps the serial killers, quote, normal, at least while they're with them. So it's not going to help to find a serial killer if you're looking for people with a lot of domestic violence issues in the past. That's probably not going to be what you'll find with a serial killer. Another idea here that she figured out is that she came to the conclusion that these acts of homicide were not externally precipitated. No one had done anything to make the serial killer lash out. This particular serial killer she's talking about is Richard Macek, Macek. She points out that no one had sexually abused him as a child, nor had they taken away his house, nor was he fired from his job, nor had small things set him off like a tax bill or the way someone looked askance at him. Nothing you might consider as having any meaning to him had gone particularly awry. As far as I could see, there was never a distinct motive in any of the crimes. So that's important as well. So the serial killer is not necessarily someone who's lashing out because he lost his job or something like that, or relationship ended. It's not precipitated by anything like that. Just that human beings are not human to them. They sometimes cannot tell if someone is dead or alive. And that serial killers respond well when within institutions or prisons holding reign over them. And they usually do well being incarcerated with the rules. She said primarily there is a pervasive hollowness in the character of the serial killer. They regarded humans as worthless annoyances to be dealt with and forgotten. And they're very good actors in dealing with people, and she says that they can be whatever you think they should be, so that when they become violent and kill, it seems to come out of nowhere. And you can't blame it on drunkenness because she says when a person is drunk, they lose their inhibition, but it doesn't occur with serial killers. It cannot be seen as a trigger. Most serial killers don't have one thing that she could point to that leads them to kill. Now, one potential trigger that she did find with certain serial killers like Richard Machek and Ed Gein was that right before they started their killings, they had a parent who died. She said something about a parent's death was one of the triggers that led them to murder. But were there other triggers? So she writes about the similarities that she's seen in serial killers. The first thing she noticed is that they were not considered by their peers to be odd or different or dangerous. The crimes were done carefully and remain undetected for long periods of time. There was one fallacy she noted after researching, and serial killer was not a phenomenon only in the U.S. The critics used to think it was only an American thing. It's not. It's worldwide. She realized with Ed Gein, it wasn't necessary to be highly mobile to be a serial killer. You don't need access to highways or throughways or an interstate system to get away and cover up your trail. All you needed was to blend in. She began to see that there was a distinction between the average murderer and the serial murderer. There was no great range of any jealousy or any deep emotion at all that prompted serial killers to murder again and again. So again, no emotional connection, no connection whatsoever necessarily between them and their murder victim. She writes that most serial killers are never caught, but they shouldn't be written off as psychopaths or sociopaths. The reason they kill is much more complex. It's not someone whom we would call crazy, not someone who's actively hearing voices. It's not that clear cut. Someone like that could murder, but they're not as organized as people who do it across time. Multiple murderers have a much deeper inner disorganization that is not really seen until they're in the middle of a crime or just as the crime is beginning. At that point, they're like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. They fall apart and then they come back together again. John Wayne Gacy, for example, is a 37-year-old contractor and he murdered 33 young men. Gacy was involved in local politics and even had barbecues in his yard for the community that included members of the police force. So a serial murderer is never as organized as a psychopath in his methodology. A psychopath can plot and carry out complex schemes. Psychopaths have a structured personality, and doctors can pinpoint, utilize, and work with. Serial killers are more scattered than that in their thinking and attack. Also, necrophilia, basically receiving pleasure from sex with a dead person, is not completely uncommon with serial killers, but it's not necessarily a constant. So it's sometimes there, not always. So serial killers often have a full social life, very active, very charming. Another characteristic, like John Wayne Gacy, is after he was caught, he believed that he was the victim. No matter how many he raped, no matter how many he tortured or murdered, he was the one who was being persecuted by everyone else in his mind. So playing the victim will be not surprising with a serial killer. Another interesting facet to serial killers is she says they are always extremely well put together. Whether they have a lot of money or not, they're well groomed and never dirty. They're highly presentable individuals who take care of themselves. So she was pointing out a story of a particular serial killer who would constantly be in the bathroom in front of the mirror, trimming his mustache and his hair and making sure his outfits looked perfect. So again, not what you might expect from a serial killer. Also, she said, one of the things we know about serial killers is they don't kill the same way every time. The victims indeed may be similar, but the way of the killing varies somewhat since serial murderers are likely to experiment.
This suspect, back when he was committing crimes, is said to have taken some kind of weird tokens, some mementos, I guess, from the scene. You've got jewelry, you've got other items that apparently had been taken. What do you make of that? Is that something that's common? Is it uncommon, and why?
It's common. They take tokens or they take a souvenir, and they keep it as if it's a reminder because they don't really remember all of the details or the people, but they'll remember this token that they have, that this proof that they did it.
And some of these things, apparently the guy didn't even take with him and, for instance, bring to his own house. He left them outside of the scene or something like that. Does that make any logical sense to you?
No, it doesn't. And they don't make logical sense at all. The serial killer doesn't make logical sense.